Hey, thank you all for joining. I won't have a long opening statement. I just think this session has been very successful all in. Obviously, there was some controversy and some friction, but that's part of the process. Excited what we've been able to accomplish this year. You saw a lot of our overrides today. We'll continue with House overrides later today. I think they advanced, I heard 5 of the 6 that they had on their agenda. I may be wrong on that. You probably could tell me better, but we plan on advancing those as well and taking up the rest of the policy bills and getting done by tomorrow. So look forward to any questions you have.
What would you say to Oklahomans who might be confused, I guess, maybe not the best word, but are looking at this last week of legislative session and looking at 60 bills introduced in JCAP, some of it, maybe even a lot of it, new language that hasn't made it through the full process of the legislature aside from this last week. Is this good governance to be considering so much policy in such a short amount of time?
I think a lot of those policy bills, not all of them, but a number of them came through the process in different ways, and then we decided to go the JCAB route to get them to the finish line. There were others that emerged in the last couple of weeks. I want more transparency on the process. I'll continue to fight to do that. I think we've had a good amount of it, good measure more than when I started, but we've still got some ways to go.
What happened, other than me maybe jumping the gun a little bit on declaring a deal was imminent, but other than that, what happened Monday in discussions as you looked through the House bills and had further discussion and got the Panasonic, 145? How did that all unfold?
I think when you get ancillary issues that we disagree on and start talking about areas we agree, you can move the ball down the field really quickly. We've been stuck on issues that separate us and not issues that unite us. And Monday we started focusing on those issues that we had pretty universal support in both chambers.
How did you get to 145 on Panasonic? What brought that to the table?
Well, the Panasonic deal still hasn't finished across the finish line over here, so it's still something that. In fact, I just spent most of the lunch hour discussing and hearing both sides of it in my own caucus meeting. 145 is the number that was needed last year when we were talking about it. We were talking about some of those dollars being through ARPA at that time. Some of those projects were deemed ineligible to be used for ARPA. Obviously, we didn't get the first plant, and so that discussion got sidelined. But last year it was always 698 and then 145 for infrastructure, and there was supposed to be a $100 million TIF from Mays County, which they failed. So I think we got to it just because that's where it was last year.
What do you think the governor will say about the budget?
I hope he'll be enthusiastic and sign it as soon as he gets it. So what will he say? I don't know. But what I hope him to say is, well done. There's a lot of one-time monies in there. I know I've seen a lot of reports on the $13 billion, but a good amount of that is one-time critical investments. You won't see that on a recurring basis. I think we balanced a lot of the needs of Oklahoma and invested historically in education, but also in infrastructure, and so I'm proud of the work our members did.
So 2 parts. Go ahead.
One of the big things he was calling for was tax cuts. I know there was some in the budget, but not the grocery tax, the personal income tax like he was calling for. Do you see him calling a special session for that? And what is the Senate's thoughts on tax cuts?
I don't know about his proclivity to call a special session on that or not. He did it last year. It didn't work out for him. So I don't anticipate him doing that this year. He hasn't told me one way or another on that. We tried to look at balancing recurring revenue and those tax cuts that we could afford through the franchise and the marriage penalty. We were ready to accept. We thought those were good policy and good measures financially, and so we'll judge everything through those 2 lenses.
So over on the budget, 2 things. What are you taking from the education side? What do you think are the victories there from the Senate? And then non-education budget items, what do you think people should know about?
Yeah, we have historic investments in teachers and classrooms and in parents being able to actually educate their kids at the institution or institutions they think best fit the needs of their children. So I think it was a huge win all around we've got to stop having this conversation. Is it in a private setting? Is it in a public setting? What's best for the kid? And this year we put aside those things that divide us and said, let's just invest in kids. And we did so both on the public side and the private side. So I'm very proud of that work. That dominated the vast majority of my time. So to the second point, we had a lot of policy wins, but I was so heavily involved in the education wins. I think that is a policy win as well. So education was the focus for me this year.
Is there anything that you feel like the legislature didn't get to this year that?
We solved everything.
Well, I guess.
Yeah. No. Yeah, we're. I don't know. We'll just have a party next year, I guess. Yeah, there's a lot of issues that we all care about that didn't get to the finish line. It's just the nature of the beast, and it took us. I got involved in it for 2 years. It took us about 5 years to pass chemo parity for insurance companies to treat people with cancer with oral and versus IV. It took 5-6 years to get that done. I was able to get it done my second year of trying that. There's a number of issues like that are outstanding that members put their heart and soul into and didn't get to the finish line for any plethora of reasons. But that's the way it is every year. And so overall, I think we really, it may have not been the prettiest way to get everything done, but it is the way democracy works and the way our form of government works to bring controversy to a head. And I've never been one that likes to run away from a fight or an argument. I like to run into it and see if we can achieve good results for Oklahomans, and I think we did on many fronts this year.
There was a lot of back and forth between House and Senate. Do you feel like you guys came to a compromise on the budget? Do you feel like?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm the pro tem of the Senate. There's things in that budget that I don't like. So it's definitely a compromise from my perspective. Now I think overall, I'm proud to defend it because it's the process. The process is really important to me, and improving that process, continually trying to improve that process. But our investments and our policy, I'm proud of it. Speaker and I were speaking last night about what do we still need to get to the finish line. So this image of him and me having arguments is absolutely factual. We've had many arguments behind closed doors and in front of the cameras. But our respect for each other is not wavered, and we just respect the process. So.
You said you didn't love a couple things in the budget. What might those be?
Well, I'm not going to try to encourage a line item veto from the governor. We'll if he line items some stuff and we choose to override it, you'll know that those are things that I did not fit that description. If we don't override them, it'll be the process of deduction.
Right. Sorry, go ahead.
One of the bills the Senate overrode the veto of, this was a while back, was the $600 million at the Healthcare Authority.
Mm-hmm.
But the House has not taken that up. Do you expect them to?
No, and I don't think they need to. We did that, and then we came up with another solution that dedicated those dollars through the budgeting process. So that was, I think, Senate Bill 1130, if memory serves me right. I've been looking at a lot of spreadsheets on all the vetoes. We overrode that. That was our preferred methodology at that time. But the appropriators found another way to tie that money up and make sure it doesn't get spent on things that may bloat that budget and not allow us to meet our needs. So I'm satisfied without that having to be overridden.
Some of your colleagues had some stern words about the vetoes here this morning on the floor. You had some stern words a month or so ago in this room. Did you ever get that apology from the governor that he offered up for a tax cut? Or I mean, how do you feel about what he did still a month later?
So I have said publicly and I've said privately to him that I thought it was beneath the dignity of his office, and I haven't wavered on that opinion. Doesn't mean that I can't work with him or have good relations with him, but I felt that that was a very inappropriate use of that authority and power. Not that he was precluded from being able to do it, but I just thought it was an abuse of that power. And I've communicated that to him. That's not going to be news to him. But we moved on. We have a role to play. He has a role to play, and we exercised our ability to override today. We put that on pause for a while. I told you all why I did that. I didn't want to give ammunition to the House to just be able to hold that to leverage in negotiations, and we're to that point now that the Speaker and I have had tremendous dialogue and discussion back and forth on which ones we wish to override. Not saying that the House is absolutely committed to everyone we overrode today, but we've been in constant communication with the House on which ones are priorities to us, which ones are priorities to them.
You taking up the OETA?
The OETA deal, I think it did pass the House, right? Yeah, so I think the author of that has expressed a desire to do that, and so I expect us to do that.
Today or tomorrow?
I think it'll be today. The exec noms and that take up more time than you would think, so it's a matter of just making sure we prioritize it, but I anticipate it this afternoon. I'm not guaranteeing it this afternoon, just for your, but I do anticipate it being so.
What's on the agenda for tomorrow, like the special session?
Yeah, well, we have some of those bills still to get to the deadline, having to have a dead day today to let it go, and then there'll be some bills that come out of conference to get that. We'll have another legislative day in special where we take up those JCABs, so just more of the same.
There's an alcohol bill that's full of a lot of spirits, and I thought maybe I could ask your opinion on how that, I don't know that you've been super involved in negotiations, but it's pretty controversial, and I didn't know whether you thought it might get a hearing if it gets out of the House over to you.
So actually I was greeted with people the very first thing I walked in today, unscheduled on 1715, I believe is what you're referring to. And I heard they highlighted, surprise or not, the lobbyists who are advocating, they highlighted the parts I liked, so I'm still in the process of reviewing the entirety of it. But we've had discussions with our floor leader team about that bill. We're just trying to keep track of everything that's going back and forth right now. That's one that's been kind of in flux and kind of, it takes in a lot of measures that were previously considered. So we want to make sure we take our time to look at it. But the parts that I've been briefed on, I like the one part that they really highlighted to me. So we'll see, trying to make sure we help continue the tourism industry down in Ho Chi Town and make sure that Able doesn't shut down their ability to be able to still be a successful town and have successful distillery and all of that. It was highlighted to me, but I've got to figure out the rest of it.
Just a personal question, once we get out of session, what happens with Mr. Treat?
I hopefully get to spend some time on a boat on Lake Tenkiller.
There you go.
Yeah. And take care of all the things at home that I've been neglecting for the past little while.
If I could ask you one more question, Superintendent Ryan Walters has
I'm familiar with him,
a
yeah.
lot of headlines, and I was curious if his style isn't necessarily your style, and he's made some remarks about teachers' unions and has, sort of feuded with one of your colleagues across the rotunda on federal grants. Does your caucus want to dig into the federal grant question? What are your thoughts on how he is leading that agency and how he is projecting Oklahoma as you try to recruit more teachers in the classroom, right?
So I heard there was some fireworks today. I'm not familiar with the fireworks other than knowing that fireworks happened today. So I'm going to refrain from commenting too much. I've got my own circus I'm trying to manage, and I don't know what's happened at that circus yet today. As far as your underlying question, yeah, the rhetoric and stuff is stuff I do not choose to employ myself. I'll have to look at it. As far as the federal grants, that language that was inserted into the education budget limits bill, I think came from the House author that you're referring to. It says that they have to have my permission and the speaker's permission. That was not something I sought to have authority to do. I was surprised when I saw it. I saw it on a tweet from, I think Andy Fugate put something out. And I was like, oh, I've got some authority I didn't ask for. We have to make sure that we ferret out the grants. In the past, I've been upset at agencies that have sought grants that run for 3 or 5 years, and then they get us on the hook and send out letters to their constituencies, hey, if the legislature would just give us another $25 million, we can continue doing this. I don't think that's what this is. I think this is grants that are ongoing, Title I, those type of things, huge grants that would have an adverse impact if we did not receive them. So I have to defer to Senator Pugh and Senator Thompson, Senator Pemberton on those discussions. I have not dug into those grants at this point.
Just to follow up, the rhetoric that you don't employ, that you're witnessing, you all have spent a great amount of time and a great amount of resources in the state to try to raise teacher pay, to create incentive programs for people to enter the classroom. And a lot of people in the education world feel like the climate of the sector right now is not, because of Mr. Walters, not what they appreciate. Do you have any concern of, do you have any counsel for him?
If I have counsel, it'll be in private. He and I, he's my constituent. And so we have a pretty decent relationship, a good relationship actually. But we haven't talked about his rhetoric. Well, that's not true. I've talked very directly to him about his rhetoric and how it doesn't line up with the way I would do things. We have great dialogue when he's in my office on actual policy things, not things that will be real trend setting on Twitter or anything else. It's just real authentic policy discussions. So I enjoy my relationship with him. As far as does that, I hear what you're saying, but I also heard before he got elected about the environment and all that. So I think it's much more systemic in making sure that teachers feel valued, and pay is part of that. But it's not all of it. Respect for the profession. I have a deep amount of respect. I can think of the teachers' names right off the top of my head that made a profound impact in my life. I would not be sitting here today without those teachers. And so I have a deep amount of respect. I think the Senate and the House have shown their level of respect for the education profession, especially since I've been pro tem, since I was floor leader. And so hopefully that doesn't taint their view of what elected officials think of what they do.
Go ahead, Mr. Pro Tem.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
No,
Oh,
I said
I
go.
thought you said, okay.
No, that's great.
We're hearing there's $272 million on the table. I know you said you haven't looked into it as extensively, but if he isn't applying for these grants, is there anything you guys can do to step in? Is there any punishment? Is there anything someone other than Ryan Walters can do?
I've got to look at our options there. This has really kind of risen to the top pretty recently in the last week and a half or so. And so I have not dug as deep as I need to on it. Senator Pugh's been looking into it. Senator Thompson's been looking into it. Senator Pemberton has informed me throughout session on how this stuff works in practice. We're starting to hear from administrators around the state about concerns about those grants that pass through to them. We will do everything we can within our power to try to make sure resources get to the classroom.
Do you have any updates on conversations around Senate Bill 368, which has to do with exceptions to the state's abortion laws? I know it went into conference, but I didn't hear much after that.
Yeah, there's been talk around it. It's been controversial. There's been more talk on email and social media than there has been up here on this recently. I don't think that's going to advance this year. It's an important issue that we have dialogue on to make sure the state's best positioned to protect unborn life. I don't think 368 is at a point ready to cross the finish line yet.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.